Hi, I'm Professor Steve Wroe. I'm a real paleontologist, and you're watching Real Paleontology. And today we ask the question, are humans super predators? And I'll give you the short answer up front. It's complicated. So we'll unpack this together in two parts. Firstly, we will look into the deep past at the evolution of human diet and behavior to determine whether humans ever were super predators. And then we will look at the more recent past and the present to see whether humans today can be considered as super predators. Just quickly, I'll repeat some definitions that we use to define a super predator. 1. A super predator is a species at the top of its food chain. 2. It's a species with no natural predators. 3. It's a species that obtains the bulk of its nutrition in the form of meat. And 4. It's a species that commonly preys on animals bigger than itself. So where do we begin? Well, the first tentative evidence that our ancestors were eating meat appears in the form of 3.4 million year old cut marks on bones from Ethiopia. This was published here in 2010 by McFerrin et al. Although stone tools were not found at this site, if this claim holds true, then the likely perpetrator was Australopithecus afarensis, the best known fossil of which is the famous Lucy. Many were pretty skeptical of this at the time, though, thinking that Lucy and her friends didn't have it in them. However, stone tools dating to 3.3 million years old have been found since, making it increasingly likely that Lucy and her kin were eating meat. However, the earliest, pretty much universally accepted evidence comes in the form of both cut marks on bone and stone tools within the same site, dating to around 2.6 million years ago. The first member of our genus, Homo habilis, was probably responsible in this instance. None of this earliest evidence, though, tells us whether the animals eaten were hunted or scavenged. And you can't be a super predator if you don't predate. The first compelling evidence of regular carnivory and predation by our ancestors appears at around 2 million years ago in South Kenya, published by Prof Wroe et al. In 2013. However, the evidence for actual predation is not absolutely conclusive. Nonetheless, the culprits here were most likely Homo erectus, and with Homo erectus we have a human that in most respects, at least from the head down, was very similar to us, fully bipedal with relatively long legs and short arms. It also had a much larger brain than Homo habilis, although significantly smaller than our own and that of our Neanderthal cousins. And it is likely too that erectus was a truly naked ape like us. It's long been argued that Homo erectus may have used a technique called persistence hunting, a technique still used today by some hunter-gatherers. Persistence hunting involves a dogged, relentless pursuit of the prey animal until it basically collapses from heat stress and exhaustion. Although these early humans could not match the top speeds of most of their potential game, they possessed features that gave them critical advantages in the long run. That's a bit of a play on words. I thought it up myself. Anyway, fact is, running on two legs is energetically way less expensive than running on four, and being a naked sweaty ape allows us to keep our body temperatures down, even if running in the heat of the African day. In doing so, these early humans would have entered a whole new niche, not occupied by any other predator before or since. These would have been fully diurnal pursuit predators. However, as is always the case in evolution, for every newfangled adaptation, there would have been a cost, a trade-off. This being that these daytime pursuit predators would have required loads of water. Sweating is a highly efficient way to dump heat, but it requires a much greater water intake. Nonetheless, as shown here by Hoare et al. In 2020, Homo erectus was probably capable of maintaining a pretty reasonable pace for at least 5.5 hours in the hot African sun. Of course, demonstrating that Homo erectus was capable of persistence hunting doesn't demonstrate that they actually did, although personally I think it's extremely likely. Either way, although we know that Homo erectus certainly included meat in its diet, just how much meat and how much of this was scavenged as opposed to hunted remain debated topics. We can't even be completely certain that they had developed projectile technology, spears. The oldest known projectile weapon is this 400,000-year-old spear from Germany, and it's highly likely that this was used as a hunting weapon. Some pretty impressive early evidence of predation appears around 125,000 years ago, perpetrated by our cousins, the Neanderthals. And these guys weren't just hunting, they were hunting big time. Elephants, really big elephants, way bigger than anything alive today. As demonstrated in this recent 2023 paper, they took down Paleoxodon. This beast grew to around 13 tons. In another 2023 paper here, we're showing that Neanderthals didn't just hunt big herbivores, they hunted big apex predators as well, cave lions no less. The lion in question was killed by a spear jab to the chest around 48,000 years ago. The same authors found evidence that a lion was skinned by Neanderthals around 190,000 years ago. And in a paper published just this year, it was shown that Neanderthals hunted huge cave bears as far back as 320,000 years ago. They ate them too. At up to 600 kilograms in weight, a cave bear is a very dangerous animal, and this would have been an ambitious undertaking to say the least. Chasing, hunting, and killing big animals in Ice Age Europe would have been tough, exhausting work. In this paper I published in 2018 along with some very clever colleagues and using some pretty sophisticated computer modelling, we showed that because of their expanded nasal passage, Neanderthals could inhale much more air through their noses than we can. Big deal, you say, but in practical terms this means that they could engage in prolonged physical exercise without breathing through their mouth. Mouth breathing leads to the loss of much more heat and water than breathing through your nose. And you definitely want to minimize losing both in the cold, dry conditions that Neanderthals typically lived in. So that classic big Neanderthal nose may have looked a little odd to us, but it was there for a damn good reason. Less direct evidence that a shift towards a diet much higher in meat than our Australopithecine ancestors is apparent in our jaw and gut anatomy and biology. Modern humans have much shorter guts and smaller colons than our living ape relatives. The microbiota of our guts are far less diverse too, as summarised by Andrew Mueller in this paper. This almost certainly reflects a shift in our diet away from fibre-dense plant foods to more meat and animal fats. It's getting a bit cool, I had to put a hoodie on. Anyway, we can't be sure of precisely when this change in gut morphology and microbial diversity occurred. But it is clear that human tooth size began to diminish with Homo habilis, and it was well and truly on its way with Homo erectus, strongly suggesting that erectus was eating much more meat than our earlier ancestors by 2 million years ago. As for our own species, Homo sapiens, there is clearly a long history of big game hunting. Our ancestors were certainly hunting mammoth in Europe by around 30,000 years ago, and beautiful Clovis stone spear points, known from around 13,000 years ago, were certainly being used to kill prey up to mammoth size in North America. Interestingly, in this paper published just last August, it is argued that these Clovis spears weren't thrown at prey, but that they were used like a pike. Basically, they propose that the hunters brace them in the ground and then coerce prey into attacking them. Not a job for the faint-hearted. This is not proven, but it is a technique that has been used as recently as the 19th century by European bear hunters, and may still be used to kill lions as an initiation rite by adolescent Maasai boys in East Africa today. I vividly remember going on a safari in East Africa with my dad 30 years ago. Here's a picture of us with Mount Kilimanjaro in the background, just for the fact checkers. Anyway, the topic of initiation came up in our camp, and I remember asking the young Maasai man who was acting as a camp aide if he had killed a lion. Yes, he said. He then demonstrated the simple mechanics of a lion kill to me. He said, you find a lion, and then you crouch, holding your spear in the ground like this. It has to be a big male lion, and then you get it to jump on you. I said, that sounds pretty freaking dangerous. He replied, not really, they usually die pretty quick. I didn't ask him any more questions on this topic, but I can imagine that things could get pretty messy if the lion didn't die quick. I'm pleased to say that this rite of passage is now very much on the decline, if not completely extinguished now. Summarising where we're up to here, it's become increasingly clear that our species and our Neanderthal cousins have long been species that eat significant quantities of meat and have been very effective predators that certainly included prey that was large and sometimes truly gigantic. This is a culmination of a trend that probably began with Homo erectus 2 million years ago. Indeed, the appearance and dispersal of our species has often been held responsible for the disappearance of much of the world's megafauna toward the end of the last ice age. The extent of human culpability here is hotly debated, but no one doubts that modern humans often hunted large prey pretty much wherever they found them. It's also clear that at some point we transitioned from a mostly plant-based diet to one that included a much higher proportion of meat. So, as I read it, certainly by the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago, and perhaps as far back as 2 million years ago, humans have been predators at the top of the food chain. It's also clear that they often hunted prey larger than themselves and had no natural predators of their own, clearly meaning that they met at least three of the four defining features of a superpredator. The only possible caveat here is whether humans meet the fourth criterion. Were they hypercarnivores, deriving the majority of their nutritional requirements from meat and fat? Humans are, of course, highly adaptable, and there can be no doubt that the proportion of meat in prehistoric diets varied depending on the time and place. Even among very recent and present day hunter gatherers, we know that peoples from lower latitudes, such as the San of Africa, include considerably more plant material than do the Arctic Inuit. It's pretty darn certain that this trend was evident in prehistoric times too. So, depending on whether or not you wish to invoke all four of our criteria, maybe we can't say that all prehistoric humans were true super predators all of the time, but we certainly can say that at least some were some of the time. But what about us in the here and now? Here it definitely gets more complicated. So far, we've tracked changes in human behaviour, hunting and scavenging over the last 3.5 million years or so, up to the end of the last ice age 10,000 years ago. This, of course, coincides with the rise and spread of agriculture and dietary reversal to an increase in the proportion of plant-based foods in the modern human diet. Today, the average human gets less than 20% of their nutritional needs from meat. There's another way to look at this. A species' position in the food chain is defined by what we call its trophic level. As defined in this 2013 paper by Homo and others, a cow, for example, is placed at a trophic level of 2. Hypercarnivores, such as polar bears, which fit all the criteria of a true superpredator, have trophic levels as high as 5.5. Where do we modern day humans fit in the 21st century? Well, here's a plot showing national trophic levels across the globe. Darker shades represent high levels. The global average is a trophic level of 2.21. The lowest is Burundi at 2.04, just above that of a cow, and the highest are the Icelanders with a trophic level of 2.57. But even the meat-guzzling Icelanders place well below any present-day true hypercarnivore at the top of its food chain. The authors of this paper argue that today's humans cannot be considered as apex or super predators on this basis alone. And clearly, even those with a relatively high proportion of meat in their diets typically no longer hunt or fish for their own meat. At best, they are predators by proxy, paying other people to do it for them. Still, in some recent papers, authors continue to define present-day humans as super predators. In this 2023 paper, Fear of the Human Superpredator, Zanet and friends demonstrate that animals of the African savanna fear humans far more than lions. The authors make an important point here, that this fear alone, in and of itself, has serious impacts with respect to conservation. It also highlights the fact that modern-day humans have no natural predators of their own. But in summary, of the 4 criteria that I presented at the top end of this video, the fact that we have no natural predators of our own, is the only one that we 21st century humans actually meet. So my conclusion is that although we clearly evolved to consume more meat than our most distant ancestors, and ultimately became super predators, we no longer are. As a cautionary note though, Bonomo and others observed that on average, the human trophic level is now rising again. And although it will never reach that of a true hypercarnivore, because of the vast and still growing size of the human population, this puts increasing pressure on our environment. Basically, because the production of meat is very inefficient and requires far more land area per kilogram produced than plant foods do. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. And tell me what you think in the comments section below. I genuinely enjoy reading them and responding.